Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Temple of the Exploding Head Omnibus, Part 1, Chapter 2, The Last Day of His Life. So last week, we meet Lord Kabyl and his slightly younger sister, Lady Kylos. They're out in the vast wooded expanse of the Telmus Grove, which extends for a long way behind Castle Blanchefort. Lots of different parts to it. Lots of old trees, lots of battles fought there in the past with the High-Tath of old. And their mentor, Lieutenant Kylos, who's Captain Davidge's first officer, is teaching Lord Kabyl how to fight Onara style, street style, how to brawl, basically, which is what Kai knows. She has no formal fighting training, just been on lots of brawls. And being only 12, Kay's an apt pupil, an eager learner, but he's still just a kid, while Lieutenant Kylos is over 100 years old, which isn't that old in elder terms, but what have you. They start to head back to the castle after they're done. Lieutenant Kylos realizes she's lost her flask, which she had full of some sort of highly alcoholic beverage. She went back to go get it. And then, while they're waiting for her to return, Kay sees Lieutenant Kylos again, beckon him into the trees in the opposite direction from which she came. And he goes into the trees and he sees Kylos, but she looks weird. She's wearing this funky black gown, which highlights her curves, which isn't how Lieutenant Kylos normally dresses. Her hair is much longer, much woollier, and she's got this funky chain wrapped around the skirt of her gown, which drags on the ground and rattles. So Kay's like, "What's all this?" She seemed like she was really cold and was trembling. He's like, "Well, it's just a tradition. Don't mind it. You fought well today. I want to give you a kiss." So she comes up and gives him a kiss, but she doesn't just give him a peck on the cheek. She plants one on him, tongue and all, and then he sees Lieutenant Kylos appear from where she'd come holding her flask, and the manifestation that he'd been kissing disappears. He tells Lieutenant Kylos she follows a trail that she's found using her Tweeterbird, and Tweeterbird can track and find pretty much anything. So she goes to investigate, and while they're waiting, Kay starts talking to his sister, Lady Kylos. She says, "Well, maybe it's the ghost." And he's like, "What ghost? That doesn't sound good." And she says, "Oh, there's this ghost that follows you around the castle everywhere. Whenever your back is turned, I see. It's like a girl ghost, maybe a kid like they are, maybe a few years older, but she wears black, like he described. She's got incredibly long fingernails, like how he described it. She's just always there. She's seen this ghost coming out of his room and standing on his terrace, and he's all creeped out." She says, "Well, I'll tell you what, we'll do an exorcism. I have this spell book that I inherited. I'm dying to try. We'll perform an exorcism." So they go to his room, and Kylos, using the spell book from her great-great-grandmother, whips up an exorcism, which probably wouldn't have worked. But Kay is an adventurous kid, and he's not afraid, and he decides to wipe away all the arcane symbols Lady Kylos had drawn on his floor, and to welcome this ghost, this pale ghost. She doesn't show up. So this week we continue Chapter 2, The Last Day of His Life. Very short chapter, but we're going to see all the societal pressures that Kay is under and how he's so far not really measuring up. It's tough when you're the offspring of great people and you just don't seem to be cut from the same cloth necessarily. And we'll see how that weighs on Kay. The chapter should be telling the last day of his life, so we'll see what we got. It's a very short chapter. I'm going to keep this brief because I've been sick all week with I ate something and my stomach rebelled, and I'm still not quite over it. So I got my chuck bucket. I'm ready to go. So let's proceed. This is Book 1 of the Temple of the Exploding Head Omnibus, The Dead Held Hands. Part 1, which is called Kay and Sam. Chapter 2. The last day of his life.
We used to be evil once, and the gods are still punishing us.
Kay had spent a lot of time finding the perfect spot where he would take his own life. He was now 13, and he couldn't handle it anymore. The constant failure, the disappointment, the blank stares as he stood there in the gallery, locked still. The great lords and ladies chiding him in review. Oh, look at his eyes, will you? Look at his hair. It's his mother's fault. His mother's fault. Lord Davidge chores poorly, and here's the result. I know. His sister now, she's a classic Blanchefort, and Vith, too bad. She's not a man. Crying? He's crying? His father coming up and whispering hard in telepathy, "You need to be strong." Even his telepathic voice rang with anger. Lord Davidge's flawed, non-Vith son. And it wasn't just the reviews that had him down. It was everything. Everything he tried, it seemed, he failed at. Space! His father was a great captain in the Stellar Fleet and commanded a starfaring vessel called the New Faith that he and mother were often away on. His father took him up in the ship several times to help him get his legs, for he'd hoped Kay might one day follow him to the stars, as father and son. Each trip had been a disaster. Kay had been badly sick the entire time. Once, they even had to turn back and send him home because he was so sick. The King Karg. His father carried a Karg, the Los Capricos weapon of his house. His father's was a huge coppery weapon called the King Karg that was monstrously heavy. Davidge often talked loudly about how he planned to give it to Kay one day. It is very heavy. It's 77 pounds standard, and I had to work up to lifting it when I was your age, Kay. So don't be put off if you find it too heavy to lift now, he said. I have this. It's a mock-up card called the Runvanyan. It's the same size and nearly the same weight. When you can lift the Runvanyan, you may have my King Karg. I shall leave it in the West Wing Library on a stand. Try it, as you will. And Kay tried it, and it was like the Runvanyan was nailed to the floor. He couldn't budge it. It was rather embarrassing. His cousin Philip could lift it, and Sarah could too, but he couldn't do a thing with it. Kay's skills. He found a list one day written by his father and Lady Poe, detailing his various strengths and failings, and the list wasn't pretty. Physical strength, poor to average. Appearance, exceptional, no childhood puffies present. Speed and agility, fair. Dirge, undetermined. Waft, undetermined. Stare, undetermined. Cloak, undetermined. Piloting skills, nil. Penmanship, exceptional. Linguistics, exceptional. General aptitude, exceptional. Sight, unknown. Kay's piloting skills. Kay clearly had inherited his mother's skills as a pilot, and that was a terrible thing. His mother had wrecked a number of Ripcars, leaving them battered and dented into shapelessness. His father, Davidge, was an incredible pilot and was keen to teach Kay how to fly. However, Kay had zero instincts, feel, or aptitude for flying. His cousin Philip was a wonderful budding pilot. He and Davidge would stand and watch as Philip and his father, Lord Peter, cavorted across the sky over the castle in their sleek Goshawk ship. Even his 7-year-old baby sister, the red-headed Hathaline, could fly a level simulator better than he could. Much better, in fact. She showed real promise, while Kay had none. Kay's gifts. Kay, his father Davidge often said, "We selected Zorn Tower just for you before you were born. It is by far the most haunted, phantom-riddled, chain-rattling place in the castle, and we selected it for you as a test for your gift of sight." The gift of sight is a proud Blanchefort tradition, going back over 1,000 years, and you, as our firstborn son, no doubt have a tremendous sight. You will most likely have more than just one gift, but the sight is the most important. You shall see all sorts of things roaming about your tower, and truth be told, not all will be pleasant. It's just part of the experience. Be bold and face your gift with courage and a spirit of adventure. Feel free to share your experiences with your mother and myself. We are always available to give ear and lend advice. But Kay never saw anything beyond the mundane. No sight. He had strange dreams, always tinted in amber, and he had lots of those. He often dreamed of himself bearing a mark around his right eye, like Mother had. But dreaming strange things apparently didn't have the same import as seeing strange things. And he saw nothing. He also heard plenty of things, such as his name whispered or shouted, strange titterings, and the occasional rattling of a chain. He heard laughing and chiding. He heard someone speaking in a strange language. Denamortsa Arendan. Arendan. He heard that word a lot, but didn't know what it meant. It wasn't Vith. He didn't know what it was. Perhaps it was some old ghost language or Hytath. He'd research it later. He also heard a friendly, jovial voice mixed into the rest, one that comforted him. It said things like, "Hey kid, don't let him get you down." He actually looked forward to hearing that voice. He thought the voice came from his gazelle. But he saw nothing, not even the pale ghost that Kai had mentioned, which was sort of a relief. And then there was the humiliation with the Sturters. "The Sturters are coming to pay us a visit, Kay," his father said, calling him into his study. It's a rather odd name, and perhaps a bit sinister as well, but the Sturters are a branch of the Sisterhood of Light, and they are our friends. They visit all the great houses, and they shall observe you and proclaim what gifts you have. And the Sturters came, wrapped up in their white robes and winged headdresses. They came in the summer when Sarah and Philip and the rest were present in the castle, and all the children were tested and proclaimed, starting at the lowest rank, moving to the highest. Between Lord Davidge, Countess Sigillis, and Lady Poe, Lord Peter, there were quite a few children to sort through, the Sturter scribe noting them on an official parchment. Millicent, daughter of Lady Poe, age 6, gifts, sight, and stare. Philip, son of Lady Poe, age 11, gifts, sight. Sarah, daughter of Lady Poe, also age 11, gifts, sight, and strength. Milos, son of Lady Poe, age 12, gifts, sight, and dirge. Mazer, son of Lord Davidge, age 3, gifts, sight, and strength. Hathaline, daughter of Lord Davidge, age 7, gifts, sight, Stair and Dirge. Kylos, daughter of Lord Davidge, aged 9, gifts Stair, Dirge, and Waft. Kabyl, son of Lord Davidge, aged 13, gifts Cloak and Waft. The Sturders reviewed the list with Davidge, Sigillis, Lady Poe, and Lord Peter, her husband. Very impressive, they noted. A great diversity of gifts, and most of the children had at least 2. Look at all the sighters present. The House of Blanchefort was truly well favored. Davidge read the list. Well, there must be a mistake, great sisters. Lord Kabyl and Lady Kylos are not listed with the sight, he said. They do not have the sight, my lord, the Sturder replied. Kay remembered the expression of hopeless shock on his father's face. No sight. A Blanchefort heir with no sight. Thousands of years of tradition lost. So he planned his death, to rid the house of his imperfect, green-eyed, purple-haired self. He put a lot of thought into it. He didn't want to leave his house in danger of extinction without an heir. His little brother Mazer, 3 years old and red-headed like a ruby, would grow to become lord of the house. Kay was replaceable. Not having Kay around would mean nothing, and his sister Kai would hold rule as house regent until Mazer grew old enough. Kai would do a good job. She was a proper Vith. The house would be fine. He picked a high balcony in the westward-facing Pendar Tower, one of the smaller towers in the castle that Lieutenant Kylos often used as a guest. It was high up, and he would fall into the crags 4,000 feet below. The crags had drainage access to the Bay of Bloodstain, so after a little rain, all the blood and gore of his dead body would neatly be washed away. There would be no mess to clean up. No fuss. Perhaps his little corpse would wash away too. Certainly Mother and Father and Sarah and Philip and Kai too would feel a little sad, but they'd get over it. They were Vith and understood such things, and there were others to take his place. The house was secure and better off without him. Today was to be the last day of his life. It was raining, and the water would be up in the crags beneath Pendar Tower. Sarah and Philip were away, gone south to spend the winter in Grand Olin Manor with their parents. Kai was away on an outing to the south with Father. Pretty empty in the castle today. It was perfect. Now all we had to do was let the water accumulate, go up to the balcony, and simply step off, and it would be like he never existed at all. And with that, we conclude Part 1, Chapter 2, The Last Day of His Life. So, we see Kay, as he matures, he's 13 years old now, is having a hard time. He's being measured against the things his parents can do, and they can do a lot. Captain Davidge is a incredible pilot. He was a helmsman in the fleet, well known for his prowess at the helm. But Kay doesn't have much of a feel at all for flying. He's not very good at it, doesn't really know what he's doing. His cousin Philip is a budding pilot with true talent, and his little red-headed sister Kathleen shows real talent for it too, but he's got nothing. He said he inherited his mother's skills at flying, and that's a bad thing, because Sig's not used to flying ships around. She's used to throwing shadow tech around and so forth. Flying is just dents things up. The Sturters came. It's a branch of the Sisterhood of Light, and they proclaim your gifts, what gifts you have. And they proclaim Kay as not having the sight. And that is a huge deal. The House of Blanchefort is known for its sight. The sight is probably the rarest of the gifts of the mind that the elders had bestowed upon the elder kind. There's a lot that are much more common. The sight is incredibly rare. And the Blancheforts have had it for thousands of years. Captain Davidge is famous for his sight. he's able to see, and with it, he can see all kinds of things. He can see far away. He can see things that are tiny, things that are invisible. He can also see a few seconds into the future and a few minutes into the past. And with that sight, he's used that in battle many times just to predict what his opponent's going to do and then take countermeasures. So Captain Davidge's sight is perfect, and Kay doesn't seem to have any sight. And that, how humiliating must that be for this kid who's always just heard his whole life, how important it is to have the sight. And they even put him in Zorn Tower so he could see all the creepy things haunting it. But he can't see shit. That is a big deal. That is a humiliating deal. And if the sisters say you don't have something, you most likely don't have something. They say Kay has the waft and the cloak, which those are pretty good gifts to have. Very powerful gifts. But no sight. The big one, the big kahuna, the big cheese, that's the one he's got to have, and he just doesn't have it. He's also not very strong, not very fast. He's not weak either, but he doesn't have the gift of strength. His cousin Sarah has the gift of strength. Captain Davidge has the gift of strength. He doesn't have that, so he's just as strong as a person his size should be. His cousins, Sarah and Philip, they both have the sight. His little sister Halfline has the sight, but not him. And so, after all this, after hearing how he's got bad breeding and bad blood, and he's got purple hair and green eyes, and doesn't have sight, can't see shit, isn't super strong, isn't tall enough, can't lift the goddamn Runvanian, which is like a mock-up of his father's Karg, his father's personal weapon, can't lift it for hell. That's it. He's done. He's going to find a nice quiet place 4,000 feet above the crags below, and he's going to jump out and let his body hit the ground after probably a 10 or 20 second fall, which doesn't sound like fun, and then just let the tide wash him away. And nobody will probably miss him one way or the other. So, that is Chapter 2, the last day of his life. Next week, we will continue Part 1, Chapter 3, Sam, and we'll see how this sad situation develops. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.